Well, good afternoon, everyone. I can just sense the energy and excitement in the room. You guys excited to be here? Tell a little energy? A little excitement? All right. All right, my name is Chris Wells. I'm a product marketing manager at Red Hat, and today I am joined by both Joe Fernandes and Katie Kelley. We're going to go through and give you an overview of Red Hat Systems Management, talk about our cloud and systems management portfolio and the different products that we have inside of it and what those products are designed to help you with in managing your Red Hat environments. We're going to break it down into several different sections. I'm going to start off first, just kind of giving an overview of the portfolio and the different products that are inside that portfolio and what they're designed to do. Then I'll go ahead and turn the presentation over to Katie, and she's going to talk about first of three products we'll go through, and that is Red Hat Network Satellite, which you'll discover is designed to manage the lifecycle of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We'll then turn it over to Joe, and he's going to talk about JBoss Operations Network. And you'll see the JBoss Operations Network is designed to help you manage your JBoss applications and deployment. And then finally, you'll get to hear me again. I'll come back up here and talk about Red Hat CloudForms, which is a new solution that we've just rolled out to help you build and manage clouds and build and manage the applications that run on top of those clouds. Then at the end, we'll kind of sum it all up together and also should have plenty of time to open it up for question and answer. So if you have any questions, by all means, we'd love to talk to you at the end of the session and answer any questions that you have. So with that, we'll jump right into things. I would imagine the vast majority of you coming to the summit this year are existing Red Hat customers. So if I just kind of take a quick survey of the room, if you could raise your hand, how many of you guys currently have JBoss deployed in your environments today? Be proud, don't be shy. And how about Red Hat Enterprise Linux? Very good, that's pretty much what I suspected. And so part of the reason for putting up this slide here is when we talk about our management tools, we want to kind of give you a roadmap. It's like when you go to the shopping mall and you walk into the mall and you're trying to figure out where all the different stores are and everything. And I know for myself, I have a bad sense of direction. When I first walk in, the thing that's most helpful to me when I see where all the stores are laid out on the display map is that nice little red dot that says you are here. And that's really the purpose of this slide here, is to say that most of you in this room are likely managing either JBoss environments and or managing Red Hat Enterprise Linux environments. And we want to talk about where you are today, some of the problems that you're facing, and then how the different management tools that Red Hat has, how it can fit in to help you solve those different problems that you're facing from a management perspective inside of those different environments. So the first two products that we're going to talk about today are Red Hat Network Satellite and JBoss Operations Network. What you'll see, and my colleagues will go into more detail, Red Hat Network Satellite is designed to manage the lifecycle of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So you'll see that's everything from first setting up systems and doing the initial provisioning, through ongoing patch management, configuration management, and monitoring those systems. And then we've got JBoss Operations Network, which does a similar concept for managing the lifecycle of JBoss Enterprise middleware and the applications that you deploy inside of that. Now, the reason that we have these different management tools, and we've had these management tools for some time, is that we know that managing IT environments is a very complex process. You know, IT environments are obviously critical to your infrastructure. The applications that run on top of them are critical for what your business is doing. And managing those applications is not easy, particularly if you're managing multiple applications and multiple systems. You know, if you're managing a handful, 5 to 10, it's not that difficult. But you start managing 20, 30, 50, 100, thousands of systems and thousands of applications running on top of them, there's a lot of complexity that goes with that. And there's different types of complexity. There's everything from the environmental complexity, so different types of hardware that we've had to deal with in the past, and now different types of virtualization you have to deal with, different types of hypervisors that you might be dealing with the cloud and the infrastructure that presents to you. Managing that complexity becomes very difficult. And when we talk to a lot of our customers, they're looking for solutions that help them manage both Red Hat Enterprise Linux and JBoss on top of that environmental complexity to make things a lot simpler, a lot easier, a lot more standardized inside their environment. In addition to the environmental complexity, you have all the administrative complexity that goes on in those environments, trying to make sure that you have the right people that have the right access to systems, both from an administration standpoint and a user standpoint, to make sure everything's going to function correctly inside of the environment. And probably one that's really popped up in probably the last 3 to 5 years is everything around compliance issues. Compliance issues, whether those happen to be internal compliance issues that you have to deal with, or especially external issues, regulatory issues, government types of regulations and stuff. And how many of you have to deal with auditors? Oh yeah, that's fun, isn't it? Dealing with the auditors that come in, you got to produce all those reports, and you think to yourself, all I really want to do is manage my IT environment and be an IT guy. And I feel like all I'm is an accountant or an auditor having to go through and produce all this paperwork and all these reports to make these things happen. And it's just a fact of life. It's a reality of what you have to do. And the more systems we add into the environment, the more applications, the more complexity that you're going to have. And so what we're going to show you throughout the rest of this session is how, once you've got both Red Hat Enterprise Linux and or JBoss Enterprise middleware in your environment, how do you deal with these different challenges? How can you overcome the challenges of the environmental complexity and the different types of infrastructure and hardware and virtualization and cloud environments you have to deal with, the administrative complexity and the system compliance? Because ultimately what you want to be able to do is drive down that complexity inside of your environment so that it's much easier to manage. You can be much more responsive. The infrastructure can be more responsive and agile to the needs and demands of what's going on inside your organization. So to start off, I'm going to turn it over to Katie, and she's going to walk you through Red Hat Network Satellite and how that can help you manage your Red Hat Enterprise Linux environments. Katie?
Thanks, Chris. Hello, everyone. So I saw that Chris took a poll of Red Hat Enterprise Linux users in the room. How many of you are satellite users? Raise your hand. Okay, so we have a good group here. And I see a couple of those Red Hat Enterprise Linux users that didn't raise their hands. So really, this is kind of geared towards you all, giving a light overview of satellite and its basic functionality today. We do have more in-depth sessions about our roadmap and future plans that are coming up, so I urge you to kind of stay tuned and attend to those as well. So this year, Red Hat Network Satellite celebrated its 10th birthday. Round of applause. So let's everybody sing happy birthday. I'm just kidding. So for over a decade, we've been crushing the complexity curve. So this allows administrators to manage their environments, access those environments, and like Chris mentioned earlier, report on the state of those environments to achieve compliance. What this does for you all is it allows you to focus on forward-thinking projects which address specific company initiatives or strategies, and as well adds to your personal career development. So you might ask, how does Satellite help with this? Like Chris mentioned, it's through lifecycle management. So Red Hat Network Satellite allows you to answer the tough questions you're faced with on a daily basis. We enable you to deploy answering questions such as, what are my operating systems, drivers, and applications? We allow you to manage, answering questions such as, how am I going to deploy those applications and roll out new versions of those applications and updates to the OS? How am I going to manage the configuration of those systems? And lastly, we answer what happens when you need to retire and redeploy those systems. We do this through a discipline of process. So our tools are there to help you govern your lifecycle and the state of all of your infrastructure. Now, if you can deploy and manage, the next step is allowing you to also do that in what we call application lifecycle environments. You have your development, your test environment, your production environment. Red Hat Network Satellite allows you to group systems and manage content and configuration for those systems so that you can achieve manageability, which also helps you build that discipline of process. So Red Hat Network Satellite is very specific to Red Hat Enterprise Linux and Linux in specific. No one manages Red Hat Enterprise Linux better than Red Hat. We make Linux deployable. Red Hat Network Provisioning makes it easier to roll out new systems, as well as scalable. You can add more systems without adding those extra admins. Satellite is built to handle thousands and manage thousands of systems, so you can manage one or two systems as easily as you can manage up to thousands. Red Hat Network Satellite also makes RHEL more manageable. We use an intuitive web-based GUI that makes it easy to work with groups of systems. And most importantly, it's consistent. We use profiles to maintain a master image of systems. Through centralized configuration file management, we reduce the opportunity for errors and inconsistencies within your environment. So lastly here, like I mentioned before, we are Red Hat Network Satellite is the end-all be-all for RHEL management. Customers come to me all the time asking, well, I have a set of RHEL desktops that I want to roll out. Can Satellite handle that? Yes. We can handle your desktops, your physical x86 boxes, other hypervisors, really any RHEL that you have running in your environment, we're able to handle. Including Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization, which we see everyone adapting and growing within their environment today. So that's just an overview of what Red Hat Network Satellite can do and some of the questions that it addresses today. I'd like to turn it over to Joe, who's going to walk you through JBoss Operations Network.
All right. Oh. There we go. Okay, so welcome everybody. My name is Joe Fernandes. I actually am product marketing manager for JBoss Operations Network, as well as our enterprise PaaS solutions that you may have been hearing about over the last couple of days. So a lot of the same challenges that Katie and Chris talked about in terms of that you need to overcome in terms of managing your Red Hat Enterprise Linux environments, JBoss administrators, application administrators face a lot of similar challenges in managing their middleware and applications environments. And so these are the types of challenges that JBoss Operations Network is designed to address. So fundamentally, JBoss Operations Network is all about deploying, managing, and monitoring your JBoss Enterprise middleware, applications, and services. And we've actually bundled this as part of what we're calling our JBoss Managed Solutions. So today, when you buy any JBoss product, whether it's Enterprise Application Platform, EAP, the enterprise version of our JBoss App Server, or you buy our SOA platform, BRMS platform, and so forth, all of those are offered in a managed variety, which basically bundles in all of the capabilities of John for managing those specific environments. And really, we're trying to do three things. First is simplify application release management using features like provisioning, patching, and so forth, and doing that across hundreds or thousands of middleware servers as well as applications. We're also helping you support IT governance objectives around areas like configuration management, runtime SOA governance, and so forth. And then finally, ensuring service levels for performance and availability with our monitoring and integrated alerting solutions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of these areas in a little bit more detail. And then, just like Katie mentioned, we have additional sessions that are specific to John. Actually, there's one this afternoon, I believe at 4:45, that's delivered by our JBoss Operations Network product manager. He'll be going more in depth around what's new in the latest release, as well as where we're going from a roadmap perspective. So for the JBoss customers in the room, definitely check that out. So provisioning and deployment, this is probably one of the least known areas of the John product. But really, it's addressing some really important challenges. First, again, just like challenges you face around standardizing deployments of RHEL systems, again, middleware administrators are facing similar challenges around their middleware and their application deployments. Being able to streamline those deployments, standardize the stacks, and so forth, and then get those out to hundreds or thousands of different systems and so forth. Just as important, though, because I know a lot of folks on the middleware side are dealing potentially with homegrown solutions for deploying middleware and apps, scripts and so forth, things that you've built yourself. But what John does is, in addition to being able to manage all that centrally, it allows you to then tie that back to important things like application performance. So because we've combined provisioning with our monitoring capabilities and everything is backed by a central repository, you can then assess the impact of rolling out a new middleware patch or rolling out new application content on how the application is behaving. Because a lot of times new deployments end up becoming the source of potential application issues, whether it's performance issues, availability issues, and so forth. The other thing that you can do here is sort of keep up with the latest updates from JBoss in terms of keeping your middleware systems up to date. So you can tie John to the Red Hat customer portal and then be instantly alerted across different versions when new patches are available. So really, this is the provisioning module within John, and we refer to that as bundle provisioning. So what you can do is you can create provisioning bundles, and those could be just for the middleware. So you can deploy, EAP, for example, to a system or to groups of hundreds of systems. So you can define system groups and then basically provision out in one shot to all those systems. You can also create application content bundles. So you can basically take your application code, bundle that together, and then you can deploy that to groups of EAP servers. So this is a new feature we added in our last release where you can actually just define groups of EAP nodes and then basically deploy your application code to the same profile directory, for example, on those nodes. And then again, as I mentioned, be able to correlate the history of those deployments and those upgrades and so forth. So every time you do a provisioning event, it gets recorded in the repository. And so you now have a history of when different upgrades occurred. So when upgrades to the middleware occurred across different systems and when new application content was deployed. And then that's important because then you can tie that to other events in your system. Again, could be performance issues, could be other configuration changes and so forth. All of that is maintained in a central repository, so you really have better change management and control over all of that. So the next area is all around sort of configuration management, which is really just an extension of provisioning. But the first thing here is really just providing visibility into what's running across your different environments. So again, our customers aren't just managing a small handful of EAP servers or a single application. They're managing hundreds of servers and dozens or hundreds of applications, maybe even thousands of servers, if you will. And so the first challenge then is to just understand what you have running. So where are those servers running? And more importantly, what applications are those servers supporting? Because ultimately what you're trying to do is manage your end user experience from the perspective of the application. So being able to sort of have a centralized console where you can actually get a view into all these servers and applications is key. And then being able to sort of make configuration changes across large groups of servers and so forth. Now, there is a management console built into EAP and to our other products, just like there's management consoles built into other application servers from other vendors. But what John is providing is it basically goes beyond just what you can get from the management console. It's allowing you to manage across, for example, not only multiple servers, but multiple domains, as well as multiple versions of JBoss and so forth. So we have a lot of mixed environments. You may be running, you may start running EAP6, for example, but you may have different versions of EAP5 depending on what applications that middleware is supporting and so forth. And then again, just like provisioning, we're maintaining an audit trail of all your configuration changes, and you can actually monitor those changes and generate events that you can respond to if an unexpected change occurs. Another recent enhancement that we added is this notion of being able to manage configuration drift. So basically this is a platform drift so that you can actually define the configuration for an entire middleware platform, all of the, the files and directories that you want to monitor, and be able to create sort of a golden template of what a good system would look like. Then what we'll do is we'll monitor that, those managed configurations over time and compare to your baseline. So basically this ties into our monitoring system. So every time you have a configuration drift or the configuration varies from the established baseline, again, you can generate an event and respond to that accordingly. And then finally, probably the area that most customers who used John in the past or have seen it are familiar with is our performance and availability monitoring. And so this is all about making sure that your applications are meeting service levels for performance and availability. So making sure that that the application is responsive, making sure the servers are up and running and so forth, and then getting timely notifications when issues occur, as well as getting enough information to reduce the mean time to repair. And so ultimately, these are the types of challenges that we're addressing here. John collects a lot of metrics, not only on JBoss, but also on other components of the application stack. So we have monitoring agents for the various JBoss products, EAP, SOA, and so forth. But we can also monitor the underlying platform. And again, it's not just Linux platforms, but we actually have monitoring for Linux, Windows, as well as Unix-based platforms as well. So you can collect platform metrics on things like CPU utilization, memory consumption, and so forth, as well as getting metrics on the middleware, as well as the application. So looking at the state of the JVM, looking at things like Hibernate statistics and so forth, and looking at sort of other application level metrics. We also collect stuff on non-JBoss products. So we have bundled in agents for things like PostgreSQL, Apache Web Server, and so forth. So there's some additional capabilities that we provide there that go even beyond just Red Hat stack. The important thing is basically being able to use all that information to determine when something went wrong. So John automatically calculates a series of performance baselines so that basically, based on the information that it's collecting, it can give you sort of a historical baseline that we calculate that you can use as the threshold for pass versus fail. And then you can obviously alter those baselines and set those as you wish, but then we'll generate alerts when a threshold violation occurs. So with those alerts, you can then code different responses to an alert. So a simple thing you can do in response to an alert is just issue a notification. So email a user or a group of users that a problem's been detected. But you can go beyond that and do things like automated operations. So you notice a server availability issue, you can call an operation to restart that server. Or you can provision a new server by scripting a provisioning operation that ties to the provisioning module and so forth. So these automated operations allow you to put in some sort of self-correcting type actions that can occur in response to an alert. And then finally, we know that this isn't the only management tool that you have in your environment. Every single one of our customers has at least one, if not several, other management tools, and probably one that's sort of your event management console, so your manager of managers. And so what we're trying to do with John is not to replace those systems that you have there, but really to tie in and provide best-of-breed capabilities for managing and monitoring JBoss. And so in response to an alert, you can basically issue notifications that end up in sort of these broader event management consoles and tie that into your environment. So again, for those folks focused on JBoss, one of the big announcements that we just did in the past week is the release of Jboss EAP6. This is the latest version of the JBoss application server and probably one of the biggest releases we've done in several years. So there's a number of enhancements there around making JBoss cloud ready, a new lightweight modular architecture that's an order of magnitude faster in terms of startup times and really built for running in virtual and cloud environments as well as physical environments. But there was a lot of improvements in terms of manageability. So in EAP6, and there's other sessions that go into this in more in depth, we've introduced the concept of a domain model. So you can run the server in standalone mode, or you can run it in a domain mode where one EAP server is sort of a host for managing multiple servers beneath it and so forth. We also added a new CLI, updated web console, and added a number of new management APIs. So within EAP itself, there's a lot of capabilities that make it easier to manage. Again, what we do then with John as part of the Jboss EAP6 managed offering is to add all of that enterprise level capabilities that I talked about. So not just manage domains, but manage across multiple domains. Not just EAP, but managing across all Jboss products. And not just EAP6, but all versions of Jboss, EAP5, 1, 5.0, even back to the 4X line. The other thing we have, as I mentioned, it's important, is this notion of history. So history from the standpoint of performance and availability monitoring, history from the perspective of managing configuration changes, history of deployments, and so forth. And then we have, again, a platform-centric view of the application. So we're not just looking at EAP, but we're looking at EAP in the context of the application that it's running, as well as the platform that it's on and other components of that application beyond just the middleware. So again, if you're managing JBoss environments today and you're dealing with issues in areas around provisioning and deployment, around configuration management, around monitoring and availability and performance, we encourage you to give John a look. And if you have any further questions, as Chris mentioned, I'm happy to take those at the end. So with that, I'm going to turn things back to Chris, and he's going to talk about managing RHEL and JBoss in cloud environments and some of the new capabilities that we've introduced for that in CloudForms.
Oh, thank you very much, Joe. So Joe and Katie did a nice job talking about what we offer in terms of managing the lifecycle of applications through JBoss and through Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And as Joe said, I'm going to talk about what's going on in the cloud. Because obviously being this week at Red Hat Summit, we've had an awful lot of cloud announcements. There's a lot, it's probably the hottest trend that's going on in computing today is everything around cloud computing. And you've probably seen some of our other sessions where we've talked about what we're doing around open hybrid clouds. And I'll talk specifically how it relates to our management tools in this particular piece. We've had, as Katie said, we've had Satellite in the market for over 10 years for managing Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We've had John in the market for quite a time managing EAP. And I would say those are kind of geared towards, I guess I'd call it kind of your data center type of configurations. And obviously what's really changed in the last few years is this whole idea of cloud computing. And when you've had the public cloud providers such as Amazon come along, they've really changed the expectation of what people want from the computing environments. You're finding people, not just in computing environments, but just in general, they want self-service access to things. They don't want to wait for a particular resource. So in the case of computing, they like the idea of being able to go out to an Amazon and say, I want access to this type of resource that has this type of machine with this type of CPU and memory and storage and what type of application and software and things on top of it. The expectations changed, and we definitely recognize that from the Red Hat side, and that's why we put CloudForms into the market as our cloud management solution so that you can build and manage hybrid clouds. So if you want to do a pure private cloud, you can. If you want to go with a hybrid cloud to extend out into the public environment. And the other key piece of that, which we've touched on a little bit with both Satellite and John for sure, is if you're going to have a cloud, the whole reason to have that cloud is for the actual applications themselves. So how are you going to be able to build and manage those applications that are running on top of the cloud? So what we've seen so far is we've talked about Red Hat Enterprise Linux, we've talked about Jboss, and we've talked about the different management tools we have there. But what's now changed in the cloud environment is, traditionally we've had what's on the left-hand side of this down at the bottom, where you have kind of the on-premise environment. Now you've got people that want to take advantage of these new application development models, deployment models, actually out in the public cloud provider. I mean, I know I talk to a lot of customers who are saying, you know what, from a development standpoint, it's a lot better for us if I could actually build and manage my applications initially out in EC2 on Amazon, and then I want to be able to control those applications and the development of those and bring those back in-house to maybe run on my production infrastructure. But to do that, I've got to have some way to really have a consistent environment across that. I don't want to have different operating environments for what I'm building and developing in the cloud be different from what I'm going to have in-house for my different types of applications and stuff. And that's where CloudForms comes into it. Because CloudForms is designed to be the hybrid cloud management tool that allows you to really span across those two different environments, so that ultimately, if you want to decide that you want to create resource pools, or what we call clouds, of different types of infrastructure resources to be able to build and develop those applications. So for example, I want to build and develop an application out in Amazon because that's the most cost-effective way for me to be able to do it, because I can rent computing time by the hour. And then after I build that application, I then want to bring it in-house and I want to put it, let's say, on a VMware hypervisor because that's where I want to do all my testing and QA. And then ultimately, I want to put it onto production on Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization because that's got better performance and security in terms of what Rev offers. I don't want to have to manage 3 different types of applications. I want to manage one application set and bring it all the way through those environments. And that is what CloudForms is designed to do. And that's what I'll talk about in this next part of it, because cloud has definitely changed that expectation of what people want. I mean, the traditional IT infrastructure, it's all really focused on how do I build and manage the hardware environment, and then virtualization has come along and people have started to consolidate and automate. And where they really want to get to with the cloud, and the customers that I've spent a lot of time with, is they really want to move beyond just serving up virtual machines and serving up components inside those virtual machines. They really want to get to true service management and really be able to publish a service catalog and define who's allowed to come to that service catalog, define those applications, be able to launch those applications in the cloud and be able to consume them in a very easy and consistent manner. And that's what we'll see CloudForms is really designed to do. CloudForms is really built around 3 primary use cases, and I'll talk about each one of these in a little bit more depth in a few slides. But it's really around 3 things. First off, in the upper left-hand corner, it's the idea of being able to build out the resource pools by being able to take different types of infrastructure and aggregate those into different types of clouds. So what do I mean by different types of infrastructure? Different types of hypervisors. So for example, if you want to build, you've got multiple virtualization clusters that you have from vSphere, multiple virtualization clusters that you have from Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization. You want to be able to aggregate those together and have a pool of private resources on-premise. But then I also talked about how a lot of people want to be able to leverage the public cloud. They want to be able to go out and use an Amazon, such as an Amazon EC2, and leverage those resources. What CloudForms allows you to do is define those resource pools and combine them together, and then you'll see in a moment be able to take the applications back and forth across them. So the first piece in that upper left-hand corner is the ability to just build out the infrastructure and the resource pools. The second part in the upper right-hand corner is then being able to actually build the applications, because the whole reason to have a cloud is you want to be able to run the applications on top of that. So you have to have an application management tool to be able to do that. So inside of CloudForms, you'll see in a moment you actually go through and create what we call blueprints. And the blueprints, if you've worked with Kickstart files before inside of RHEL, it's kind of analogous to that. It's kind of the same concept where you're going to go through and define what kind of software content will go into your application, what type of configuration will go into it. You'll then take that, put that into the catalog. As an administrator, you'll publish out that catalog, and then that'll be available for your end users to actually come to a self-service portal and then be able to choose what applications they want to deploy, depending on what kind of permissions you've actually given to them. Which takes us to the final piece of the puzzle down at the bottom in the green, and that's really this whole idea of self-service. When a lot of people think of cloud computing, particularly when they think of infrastructure as a service, when they think of an Amazon, for example, a lot of what they think about is really this whole idea of self-service, that you want users to be able to come in and instantly have access to a resource. So you want to define a service catalog that defines the different types of applications in it, allow people to access those applications, and then deploy it onto the infrastructure that you've specified. That's what CloudForms is all about, is being able to build and manage the hybrid cloud infrastructure, be able to build and manage the applications that will run on top of that infrastructure, and then be able to provide that infrastructure to end users via the self-service portal. So let me talk a little bit more in depth about what each one of those things actually means. As I said, most people, where they're going to start with is the first thing they're going to want to do is define the actual cloud infrastructure inside of their organization. If you've had a chance to attend some of our other cloud sessions today, or previously attended some of our webcasts or some of our white papers, you'll see that what we really try to emphasize at Red Hat is this whole idea of the open hybrid cloud. The whole idea of the open hybrid cloud is that first, on the hybrid side, we believe that you ought to be able to choose essentially the right infrastructure for the right job. You should be able to leverage infrastructure assets that you already have in your organization. So if you already have vSphere clusters, for example, we want to give you the option to be able to leverage those inside of CloudForms. If you want to be able to use Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization, because you've seen some of the SpecVirt stuff in terms of performance and also in terms of security and price performance that we have with Rev, and you want to try that out in your environment, you're allowed to do that as well. You can really kind of pick the right infrastructure for the right job, as well as be able to leverage public cloud providers like Amazon. So if you want to be able to go out and just rent stuff or do cloud bursting, be able to rent stuff by the hour or so to develop applications, we believe that you should have that choice. So one part of it is the hybrid message, being able to choose different types of infrastructure to mix and match inside your environment. The other part, of course, being Red Hat, is that we're very committed to open source. We're very committed to the whole idea of choice. No one would love you more than me that if you bought an entire Red Hat stack from us. So if you bought Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization, you bought CloudForms, you bought RHEL, you bought JBoss, I'd be a very happy man. But I also realize that out there in your IT environments, it's going to be heterogeneous. You're going to have different hypervisors. You're going to have different guest operating systems. You're going to have different middleware and application tools that you want to work with. And because we've designed CloudForms in such a way around interoperability and open source, we give you that choice. Give that choice to pick really kind of the right infrastructure for the right job, the right application tools, be able to build out those environments. And then once you have those environments in place inside the infrastructure, be able to specify them for different lifecycle uses. So for example, if you want to have a development cloud, test and QA clouds, production clouds, you can set up that infrastructure, size it appropriately for whatever the use is going to happen to be for how you want to deploy your applications. So the first part of this would be to actually go through and build and manage the actual hybrid clouds themselves. The second part would then be to actually build the applications themselves. As I mentioned, the way that you're going to do this inside of CloudForms is you're going to create what we call an application blueprint. And the application blueprint, you'll go in as an administrator and you will design that. And the blueprint will basically say, here's what kind of content and what kind of configuration is going to go into the eventual application that you want to create. Kind of roughly analogous to what we do with Kickstart files today. You'll go through as an administrator and you will create the application blueprint. So you may create one, let's say, for middleware development tools environment. You might create one for a web server, database server, really however you want to be able to define those. You define and create as many blueprints as you want. You'll then take that blueprint and actually publish it into the service catalog. Once it's been published into the service catalog, then you can actually assign which users are allowed to access it. So you define all the roles, policies, permissions of what users are allowed to access, what different types of applications that you publish into the catalog. Once those are available in the catalog, then end users are allowed to come to the self-service portal, which I'll show you more detail in a moment. And from that self-service portal, they can do all the self-service provisioning. So you're actually putting the actual provisioning process in the hands of end users so they can actually then deploy those blueprints. What actually happens in the background is that when a user selects a blueprint, it actually then builds the appropriate image in the back end of CloudForms, then deploys it onto the appropriate provider. So for example, you might decide that I want all my databases to be on a particular virtualization cluster, or I want all my certain application tools to go out to Amazon because we develop our applications out there. You define the policies and the procedures and decide where those blueprints go to, which users have access, and which types of infrastructure they can actually be deployed onto. All that's going to be controlled through this. The final piece of the puzzle, when I talk to a lot of our data center customers, or a lot of our enterprise customers, I should say, they find cloud interesting because they get a lot of pressure in their organization to have their IT infrastructure be more agile and more responsive. So they're really interested in this idea of self-service because they can show the end user kind of a public cloud experience by being more responsive and letting the user get access to resources. But one of the things that a lot of IT administrators that I talk to and IT architects and compliance people and stuff are really scared about is really the ongoing manageability. All of a sudden, if we take a traditional provisioning process, which has been controlled by centralized IT, and we put that into the hands of end users, are end users really going to manage those systems on an ongoing basis? Are they going to make sure that if any kinds of security updates come out, if there's any kind of configuration changes, anything of that matter, is the end user really going to manage that? And we all know the answer is no. End users aren't going to manage those. I mean, if I set up an environment so that developers can create applications faster, that's great for the developer, but as that system administrator, I'm still responsible for the security, availability, compliance of all those systems. I'm not going to let my job survival hinge on whether or not a developer has put the right security patches in place because an emergency update just came out. I have to have some kind of control over that. And so that's the final piece of the puzzle here. That's really the ongoing management. Because every time an end user is going to go through and actually provision a system and put it out there in put it out on a cloud, CloudForms is going to be able to track all those types of things and alert the administrator. The administrators are able to go through and define all the policies and procedures for how on that instance is going to be allowed to live. Maybe I want to set up quotas for how many are allowed to be on a particular virtualization cluster. If I need to go out and manage those systems because I've been alerted that there's a security errata that's come out, I want to be able to push that out to all those systems. I know where all those systems are. I've got the audit trail for all those things. I've got control of those systems, and I'm able to push out those updates. So I think it's important when you talk about building out a cloud, it's not just about building the cloud infrastructure, it's actually about being able to build and manage the applications. And I'd put a lot of emphasis not just on the build piece, because that's what a lot of people think of when they're setting up their cloud. I want to go to a self-service portal and have instant provisioning. A lot of it's really about the ongoing management of it. Because we've had to fight physical sprawl in the past, we've had virtual sprawl now. Cloud sprawl could be even worse. Because I know I've talked to a lot of people who are just scared to death of cloud. Because all of a sudden they're worried that end users are going to be able to provision systems and they're going to have no idea where those resources are being consumed. And a system like CloudForms allows them to be able to maintain control over that. The final piece of the puzzle, which goes along the theme of control, is around the self-service piece. Because to the end user, that's where CloudForms is going to be the most visible. Because they'll actually go to the self-service portal, and based on their user ID, the administrator will be able to decide what application blueprints they're allowed to have access to, so essentially what applications are they allowed to stand up. And they'll also be able to define all the policies, so not only what they're allowed to access, but when they're allowed to run it. I know one thing that I've talked to customers about they worry about is this whole idea of elasticity. I mean, the idea of a cloud is it's infinitely elastic. And so if I'm putting resources out onto Amazon, that makes sense, because Amazon, from my perspective, almost does feel infinitely elastic, because I can always get access to resources. But if I'm running stuff on a private cloud, internally where I've got it across, maybe different virtualization clusters, I know that virtualization cluster is only going to have so much capacity. So as the administrator, I've got the ability to go in and say, I'm only going to set up quota on that particular cluster of how many applications are going to be able to be provisioned onto it and actually be able to run on top of it. So I still have that kind of control, because again, I'm responsible for that performance, security, availability of that infrastructure. I don't want to overload it. So again, this allows me to put controls around that. So we believe from a Red Hat perspective that it shouldn't be just about self-service for end users, it really should be around this concept of governed self-service, that I've got policies and procedures in place to actually control what's actually going to go onto that infrastructure. Because at the end of the day, the cloud really should benefit both parts of the organization. It should be able to benefit the end users because they get access to self-service resources. IT infrastructure feels more agile and responsive to them. They're better able to meet what the demands of the business are and respond to it. While on the other side, the administrators are able to win because they still have the necessary control and governance they need to maintain that infrastructure while yet still responding to what the needs of the business happens to be. So CloudForms altogether really focuses around those three use cases of being able to build and manage cloud resources, being able to build and manage an open hybrid cloud, being able to build and manage the applications that then go on top of the cloud, and then finally be able to provide that in a governed self-service type of manner. Putting all those things together, that's what the Red Hat cloud portfolio is all about. We started off talking initially about our main products around Red Hat Enterprise Linux and JBoss Enterprise Middleware and having specific management tools for those. And then now we know people want to be able to take that into the cloud, being able to have the hybrid cloud management, to be able to provide a consistent operating environment across both on-premise and out to the certified cloud providers. Do you guys have anything else that you want to add? All right, so that takes us through the formal part of the presentation. We'd be happy to take any questions that you have. Question? Right. Yeah, so I think, let me go back here for a second. So for those of you that couldn't hear, the question was how would you do kind of the patch management on the CloudForms side, and how would you do that? There's several different parts to that. So probably the simple way to start is that when you create the application blueprint, that's the definition of all the software and content that's going to go into it. And what you're probably going to do is you're going to take that blueprint, you're going to tie it to a number of systems. So whatever systems are tied to that blueprint, anytime you make an update to that blueprint, it's then going to push those changes out to those systems. So for example, one way to do it is you could decide that I might have a test blueprint, development, test QA, production blueprint would be one way to do it. Move things through, and then whenever you decide, let's say I got 50 systems tied to production, once you make the updates to that template, you can then push those out. You're talking on the production side of things? Okay. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of different ways you do. I mean, ultimately what you're going to do is from a technology perspective, you're eventually going to update the blueprint itself, and that's going to replicate the changes through. Now, the other part that you can do, it kind of depends on politically how your organization's set up. It sounds like because you've got multiple different organizations that you may actually want to have multiple different development clouds, as an example. So you could actually, when you define the resource pools, yeah, I mean, what you could do is you could decide that you might want to actually, when you actually set up the clouds themselves, the resource pools, you may have like you may have development pool for division A, development pool for division B, C, D, and then you could either use the same blueprint across those, or you could have multiple different blueprints. But a lot of it's going to depend on how you want to, on kind of the politics of your organization and the process that you want to do. The tool's pretty flexible, if you will, to map into however you want to define your process.
Yeah, some of this is shown if you haven't checked out some of the CloudForms demos that are available now on redhat.com, I'd encourage you to do that, because as Chris mentioned, you're not just setting up one cloud that's backed by these various providers, you're setting up multiple clouds. So you could have a development cloud, a test cloud, a production cloud, or what have you, or multiple ones of those. But then within each cloud, you could also set up what are called cloud resource zones, so you could further segregate that by application. So in our demo, we use an example of the development cloud but then having cloud resource zones that are mapped to different application teams. Exactly. WebSphere, JBoss, or my financial applications, my backup, my CRM apps, and so forth. And the idea being then that the reason you want to do that is because, as you mentioned, different application teams within the development cloud have different needs, different infrastructure that you may want to update on different cycles and so forth. And so that really gives you the flexibility to do that on a more granular basis. And then to Chris's point, really when you look at the application lifecycle management, that's essentially the next generation of our Red Hat Network Satellite type technology and so forth. And so before you can build an application blueprint, you build what's called a component blueprint, which is basically a component of that application stack. And what you're doing, going back to what we call the system engine, is managing the content, the entitlements, and the configuration of those components. So you take a component blueprint, say, for an Apache web server, and another one for, say, JBoss middleware or whatever, and then you sort of knit those together into an application blueprint that then deploys out the stack and so forth. So basically that's how we can manage content going all the way back to individual application components.
Yes, I mean the control can start off really, really simple, or you can, as Joe was talking about, you can get pretty granular and show you how to divide and conquer.
Other questions?
Other question. So today, in the first version that we just released earlier this month, what you would do is you'd essentially set up quotas. We don't really have a capacity management module per se that goes in, but you can go in and set up the different types of quotas, as an example, on the different types of providers. You're going to define the credentials, like here's my virtualization cluster for VMware or for Rev or for EC2 on Amazon, and you would set the quotas of how much capacity you want to use.
The other thing you can do is, from sort of a application capacity and so forth, is you can deploy CloudForms together with John, for example, for JBoss environments. So we have a reference architecture that we just published for CloudForms with EAP6. And what we did is we deployed out EAP6 nodes in like a JBoss clustered environment. But with each of those EAP nodes, we deployed the John agent. So as CloudForms deploys those instances, they instantly register back to John and are now managed in the cloud through the John server. And so what John adds to CloudForms is things like performance and availability monitoring of the applications that are now running in your cloud. So you can look at sort of application capacity issues. And one of the things we're working on then is sort of closing the loop on that and enabling things like auto scaling. So like, the monitoring tool detects a performance issue, it tells CloudForms to go and put a new instance into a cluster and so forth. And not just with John, but with third-party monitoring products as well. So we're building out sort of the API set to do that type of thing as well. Other questions?
Question? You're talking about the guest operating systems? Yeah, so good question. Today with CloudForms 1.0, on the guest operating system, we support Red Hat Enterprise Linux. On the roadmap, we've got support for other operating systems like Windows, but in the version that's shipping today, it's just Red Hat Enterprise Linux. But that is one of our goals, is to be able to support other types of guest operating systems besides just RHEL. I mean, absolutely. That's where we're absolutely headed, is to be able to support other types of things. I mean, one of the things that we've done from an architectural standpoint is if you go out and look at some of the different open source projects that are inside and actually from the upstream that actually then make up CloudForms, one of the underlying projects is a project called Pulp. Pulp is how we manage all the content itself. Pulp is actually content agnostic, so it doesn't care if it's Windows content or RPM-based content like RHEL or anything else. So we've purposely chosen those kinds of infrastructure so that we can do that, but today we only have it certified and supported for RHEL.
Yeah, and you mentioned the blueprints, which is really where this starts, because right now in 1.0 the blueprints only support RPM-based content, so therefore it's sort of the RHEL limitation. But we're looking on expanding that to support other packaging technology for Windows and other types of guests. You do have sort of an option in terms of importing existing VMs, right? So in addition to building virtual machine images from your blueprint, you could import existing sort of vSphere VMs or Red VMs and so forth. And so that's potentially an option for getting non-Linux guests on there. But really, in terms of what we support all the way through, it's RHEL in the 1.0 release. Other questions?
Question? So it's a good question. So from a satellite, you want me to answer or you want to? Okay. You want to start? Your mic's, there's mic on.
We're going to release a new version of Satellite in the fall. And we'll kind of move alongside CloudForms in our development so that you all can continue to grow both environments and in tandem. And then we will have the tools in place within the appropriate time frame so that you can migrate over to CloudForms.
Yeah, I mean, I think conceptually the way to think of it is that, Satellite's currently on the 5X series, and we're basically taking a lot of the capabilities that we have in Satellite today around managing the lifecycle of RHEL, and you can see it up there in the yellow. We're putting that into CloudForms. So you can conceptually think of CloudForms as kind of Satellite 6.0, and we're basically doing a pretty big technology upgrade to move them over. It'll be a lot of the same capabilities, but we're moving it over. And one of the main reasons we're moving over was actually related to the gentleman who was asking the question about content and guest operating systems. Satellite's been a great product for us, but it's a 10-year-old architecture, and it's hard-coded to manage RPMs. So when customers have come to us on the Satellite side and say, hey, we'd like to manage Windows, or we'd like to manage other flavors of Linux through Satellite, it's really difficult because it's all hard-coded to RPMs. By moving that into CloudForms, we'll still have all the RHEL management capabilities, but now we can manage Windows and other kinds of things. So from a pure technology standpoint, the current Satellite code base will eventually transition, but what we do as far as RHEL lifecycle management, we'll definitely be doing going forward. Other questions? Today I know we have the LDAP integration.
Yeah, so we do have LDAP integration in terms of for user authentication, so you can map sort of your roles and permissions from platforms to existing LDAP user roles and groups and so forth. I know that that's an area that they're continuing to expand, so we're looking to sort of build on that going forward. But there is. Okay. That's a sign that it's over. Okay.
That's the hook.
That'd be cool if the next session is So check that out. I think that the guys down at the CloudForms booth will probably do more justice in terms of explaining limitations currently versus going forward. That is what we're trying to do. We're not trying to create a new authentication requirement. We have you sort of create all the users and groups and so forth within CloudForms.
Well, very good. A couple of logistics things to finish up on. As far as the Summit Cup is concerned, the check-in code for this particular session is 1565, so 1565 for the Summit Cup. So 1565 for that. And then if you're interested in finding out more information about CloudForms or really any of the other products we have, these are other cloud sessions that we have coming up today, tomorrow, and on Friday to talk more about our other cloud sessions. So be sure to check these out if you want to find out more details about CloudForms or about some of the solutions that we announced today. And the last element, if you have individual questions, you want to talk more in detail, please feel free to come up, and Katie, Joe, and myself would be happy to talk to you either now or we'll all be down at the Red Hat booth towards the back is where the cloud section is. We'd be happy to talk to you there. We'd also be interested in getting your opinion about what you're doing around cloud. And if you come down to the booth, we'd love to have you take a quick survey because we're trying to get some more information about some customer interest and stuff around some particular cloud offerings. So again, thank you guys very much, and have a great day.